Oh, 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 oh. Before we get started, I do need to say a quick thank you to Mevo for sponsoring this video. Mevo is a pocket-sized live event camera that lets you edit your video while your event unfolds. Easy to use and versatile. Now you can stream live from anywhere over Wi-Fi or LTE. This game-changer camera is like having a TV studio in your pocket. Cool and fun to use, live editing puts you in the control room while still inside at your event. Buy Mevo today and use it for your next event to live stream in professional quality. I am really loving this camera and getting great use out of it for my art live streams. If this is something that could benefit you, make sure you use my $50 coupon code and check it out for yourself. Welcome back to another video. It is so good to see you here. Today, I thought in keeping with this little art-a-thon trend I've been getting up to, I would try to do 40 paintings in 10 hours. To break that down for you, that is 15 minutes per painting without any accounting for urination, food, basic hierarchy of needs, strategizing. It's a great chance to make a whole ton of paintings and I like it. Any of the paintings you see in this video will be available on my website, which is linked down below along with all of my social links. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome to the voiceover. We are getting started right away with my little stopwatch going. I am going to wing this voiceover and I have a million things to say, so hopefully I remember them all. But this is live and authentic, coming to you from my bedroom. Right off the bat, I'm getting started with watercolors. I wanted to just do some simple color fields, get myself loosened up, and you are going to see as I go throughout this process, there is a general refining of what I'm doing, getting used to the pacing of things, building up. It's like vocal exercises. I'm warming up in this beginning stage. So I did a lot of fast, low pressure works, and I think that really lent itself to the general build-up of these paintings. Just because you guys might be curious, I'm using these, I think they're called Vivia watercolor sheets. It's essentially a booklet of watercolors that you can bring with you on the go. It's very pigmented, which is super fun. Not sponsoring them or anything, but I do think they're a lot of fun. These watercolors ended up being a really interesting tool along the way because as I was using tape along the sides of my paintings, watercolor was building up on the tape that I was using and reusing, and it found its way working into different paintings, which is very cool. I also tried to use a variety of mixed media, and the way the watercolor would interact with acrylic when I would put it on top, as I'm doing in that blue painting on the bottom, is very interesting. It bleeds in and it takes away some of your control, which I am a big fan of. Throughout this whole process, doing these timed paintings, having very limited ability to think and sort and problem solve, you just kind of have to build off of this intuition, and it's a very unique experience that really lent itself to idea generation, to not being afraid of working imperfectly, and to just kind of listening to some of the inbred techniques and ideas that are starting to filter into what I'm doing. This is a great way to kind of peer into your art subconscious. So that last painting was our first acrylic. This is when I shifted from more loose watercolor into a variety of mixed media, predominantly acrylic. As I went on towards the end, I did slightly longer format ones. Each of these paintings is done in a variety of ways. Some of them are using reference photos that I've taken, some are completely from my imagination, some I was on Pinterest browsing and finding different images to do studies of, whether it was different artists or different reference photos. I was taking them and doing my own interpretation. The thing that I found extremely beneficial to doing that, and the reason I always promote doing studies of other people's work, is because you try out things that you normally would not think to do. You start to replicate a way of depicting things that the artists themselves are employing that on your own just haven't come to mind. But by doing these studies, they start to work their way into your regular practice. And honestly, I learned a new way to paint clouds throughout this process. Some of these pieces are a little bit crazy. Not all of them are things that I understand how they could potentially work into what I'm doing, or if they tie in, or if I'll do anything with them in in the future, but that's the great thing about this exercise is you're just getting ideas out and getting them out fast. You're not overthinking anything. With only 15 minutes per painting with no breaks in between, you literally don't even have time to plan what you're doing. You're just kind of organically flowing through each of your works. While I was doing this painting marathon, I was listening to the Creative Pep Talk podcast. I've been kind of hyping it up lately. If you saw my last video, you may know that I met the creator of the podcast, Andy J. Miller, aka Andy J. Pizza. After I left that conference, I went and listened to a ton of his podcasts, and I've just been obsessed. And one of the podcasts that I was listening to while I was making this was really starting to put in perspective why I've been so interested in these painting marathons and in doing these quick-paced, timed artworks. I think it's relevant to two different podcasts that I listened to, one being about this concept of a 100-day project. Now, this isn't something that Andy came up with, but it is a project that two women he was interviewing on his podcast were working on, and essentially it's that you just do something, anything, creative generally, for 100 days, and you have to be posting about it on social media. And the person who created this said something to the effect of, your work really doesn't get that interesting until you hit day 50. And the reason he says for that is because at that point is when you're starting to feel like you are running dry. And when we reach moments like that, we have this kind of make it or break it moment, right? We have to decide how we're going to keep going or if we're going to keep going. And for those who do persevere, there is a genuine required creative problem solving process that takes place. You have to think outside of the box because you've exhausted the ideas that would normally flow to you, which is something that came about within this whole Art-a-thon. I had to think in very different ways. I had to think very fast. I had to think very intuitively. I had to just kind of let what happened lead me and see what came of it. And if I didn't love something, there wasn't time to scrap it and start over. I had to just go with it. At this point, we were 5 hours in. We're at the halfway point. I was doing pretty good. I had created 22 pieces already, so on track. And I really wasn't thinking so much about the specific timing of each. I was going intuitively off of what my internal clock said, and it worked out quite well. But at this point, I did a live stream using my Mevo camera, which is pretty cool because you can see in this shot some of my behind the scenes process. I have tons of supplies out. I was working in watercolor, colored pencil, acrylics. I have my live stream in front of me. I have my reference photo in front of me. I have my phone in front of me. I was doing stories on my Instagram the entire time. I was interacting with people. I was getting direct messages, so I had tons of notifications coming up. This whole process felt like a whirlwind. And while I was doing it, I felt like my brain was on half speed. I was trying to talk during my live stream. I was trying to paint at the same time, but something happened during those first 5 hours. I hit a sort of flow, like my brain was taking over and I was working off of muscle memory or something. And this painting was one of my favorites that I did throughout the process, and I think it only took me 15 minutes. Something that's amazing about this process is working quickly has been able to help me break down some of the perfectionism that I've been so obsessed with and learn to loosen up my brushstrokes. When you are working this quickly, you have to take out the possibility of perfection. You have to go into a mode where you are looking and strategizing about making your image in a different way. You have to prioritize what you want to get down to create the overall image because you don't have enough time to get everything down, right? I think that's a great way to break you out of certain mental habits that you may have in your practice and force you to just be thinking in new ways that could be informing you in the future, in ways you just don't know. And that's the great thing about doing experimental work, putting constraints on yourself, giving yourself exercises, and forcing yourself in some ways to fail or not do your best work. Because things will come out that you are doing unintentionally, things will come out that are happening intuitively, things will come out that you don't realize that you're interested in or that you might want to push forward. You'll surprise yourself, and that's a really beautiful thing to happen in the creative process. The whole thing with creativity is we want to be innovating. So if you're feeling in a rut, I think this is an excellent way for you to start generating new ideas, is to do practices where you are forcing yourself out of your general routine. Okay, so you know that I'm talking off the fly and this is just happening live, so I'm gonna go back in time to when I said I had a second point to talk about from Andy's Creative Pep Talk podcast, and that was this idea that one of his guests presented of quantity over quality. Okay, now this sounds super weird, I think, to most people as creatives, as perfectionists, as professionals, because in everything, I mean, even in friendships, we talk about the idea of quality over quantity. But the argument here, this is from a man who does an artwork and posts it every single day. And he's been doing this for a long time now. It's part of his regular practice. But what he advocates is this idea that quantity produces quality. And I can get behind that in a lot of ways. Here's why. When people want to know how to improve their art, honestly, the only thing I can say is practice. And that's such a cliche. It's so overheard. It's one of those things that you hear and you're just like, yeah, and you kind of blow it off because it's something you hear all the time. But it's the absolute fundamental truth. The only way you're going to get good, really good at something is by giving so much of your time and attention and love and passion into it. And so when you are doing things where you're creating a ton all the time, even if it's not your best work all the time, you're going to be learning every step of the way throughout that process. That quantity, that excessive amount of time, all of that exerted energy is going to lead you to have these breakthroughs and discoveries that you would not have access to otherwise. So those are the major takeaways I had throughout this process. That's what I've been learning as I've been doing these art-a-thons, as I've been doing in my personal coaching practices, these timed images, and as I've been going through my experimental phase, allowing myself the freedom to just try things and make imperfect work. More and more, I'm just starting to embrace new ideas by taking away this fundamental feeling I have that I have to protect whatever my artistic identity is, whatever this brand I've created is. Stripping that away is allowing me to explore new ideas and work in new ways, and who knows where it all leads. But at least I know I'm leading somewhere, and that I've resparked a fire in my work. And that is an exceptional, beautiful thing that I hope all of you guys can try to capture. Here are the paintings that we made. I only made it to, can you guess what number? Were you keeping track? I am so happy with the work that I did do, and so impressed by some of these paintings, and really excited about what I can take from these things I've learned and carry into future work. Do you guys have favorites? Which ones did you like? Are the same ones that I liked? Who knows? Let me know in the comments. And again, try something like this. Challenge yourself. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I didn't quite make it to 40, but I was dang close. And I feel like I learned really exceptional lessons throughout this entire experience, so I would totally extend this challenge to you as well. At least something similar, you know. Lots to be learned though, and it's blowing my mind. Oh, also, if you guys didn't see my video from last week, I highly recommend it. I'll link it down below. It is an extremely personal and wonderful video to me, so I really appreciate you viewing it. Once again, if you guys want to buy any of these pieces, link down below to my website and my social media accounts so you can follow me along. And a final thank you to Mevo for the camera. You guys have an excellent weekend. Make sure you're subscribed, make sure you like the video, and I will see you next week. Bye.